Thank you so much, Dr. Shobha, for introducing us. This has been really a lovely introduction for me so far. And thank you everyone for joining us in the conversation today with one of our new faculty member, Dr. Teresa. First of all, welcome, Dr. Teresa. We are very happy to have you in our faculty league here at UFM. So to start off, could you tell us a bit about your personal background, as in where are you from, where did you grow up, your education, your career path till now?
Where I grew up is sort of a complicated story. So my mom is Korean and my dad is white American, and I was born in South Korea. And then we moved to Wisconsin while my dad did his PhD. And then we went to Singapore for 10 years. And so I did most of my schooling in Singapore. And then I went to undergraduate at the University of Chicago, then moved down to Durham, North Carolina to go to grad school at Duke. Then I moved to Canada, to Toronto for my postdoc. And then I did one last year at the University of California, San Francisco, before I came here. So I've been hopping around for a little while.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, when was the time throughout your career journey, when was that time when you knew that research is going to be your thing, that you are going to be the captain of your research?
So I hear a lot of stories about people who really loved science from an early age. I was not one of those children. I got into science really in my AP biology class in high school, when I realized okay, this could be interesting. And then the critical point was when I started doing research in undergrad. So I got to start my sophomore year using one of the same kinds of undergrad research programs like there is here. And I joined Dr. Martin Feeder's lab. And so I worked on small heat shock proteins and Drosophila.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, I'm going to do evolutionary genetics. And it was amazing. I really loved it. And I liked being able to use genetic techniques to answer biological questions. So that was what got me sort of interested in the research path. So I worked in a lab for 3 years, the same lab, which was really, really great. And then Martin is just a really fantastic mentor, really cares about his students. And so he runs a lab that was mostly postdocs and undergraduates, because then he could do enough research and then also mentor the undergraduates really well. So we had a lot of direction. And so then he helped me apply for grad school and was sort of critical in the decision of if you like biology, are you going to go to med school or grad school? I'm sure that a lot of people have done that. Turns out I'm very squeamish, so I think this was a good choice.
So you were a pre-med undergrad at some point.
I think it's one of those default, if you like biology, you've got to be pre-med. I sort of didn't realize the other options.
Yeah.
And then once I got into research, then I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. And so then when I got to grad school, again, it was still I liked research, I wanted to do it, but it wasn't until a couple years in before I realized I wanted to stay on the academic track.
Right.
So
yeah, that's quite interesting to know, because for a lot of people, having the undergrad research experience matters a lot. It kind of becomes a turning point.
Right.
As you said, you were also a default pre-med undergrad, like many of us, especially for me, if I have to say, people who are coming from India, it's you either be a physician, a medical doctor, or an engineer, of course, or in US you become a lawyer, for example. So having that undergrad research experience definitely has helped you, as you just said, in deciding.
Right. Absolutely. And I think there's such a big difference between how we learn science in classrooms and then how we actually do science. And so being able to realize it's not just learning from textbooks, but actually asking questions about the world. I think that was really critical. And it's, even my father's an academic. And so I knew that, I knew about academia, and still I was well, what can I do with the biology? I got to be a pre-med, right? And so I think that's a big point to undergrad research, is to say it's not just, there's a lot of opportunities out there that are not the one career path of be a doctor.
Sure. Yeah. That exposure matters a lot. From there, you went to grad school. So can you tell us a bit about your sort of key experiences as a grad student at Duke, more specifically, how you chose your PhD lab and how was your experience as a mentee?
Yeah, I think choosing a mentor in grad school is one of these like really critical decisions. But let me like step back a little bit more. I got married like the week after undergraduate, so I was already doing a two-body problem, and so we applied pretty broadly for grad school. And one of the big decisions was trying to figure out where to go, what's the right place, and I think people here have already like decided that, but the decision was trying to figure out where you're going to be happy.
Yeah.
Right? You see a lot of places, and you're like, okay, well, I don't want to count on being an outlier in terms of happiness. I want to go where, in general, like it's likely that I'm going to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of the same piece for choosing a faculty mentor. Is like everybody's doing really cool science, right? Like everywhere you go, people are doing really neat stuff. And I thought that I was going to do evolutionary genetics more, but I got to grad school and I rotated in a couple labs, and trying to figure out who's the right person to spend the next like 5-6 years with and be like, all right, I'm going to work well with you. It takes a lot of introspection to say, what kind of mentoring style do I need?
Mm-hmm.
And it can be different for different people at different times. So you have to think about like, what are you going to need in a year or 2 years or 3 years? And then also, like, do you work well with that person? I think the baseline is like, the science is cool. There's always so much cool stuff to do. You've got to be like at least someone interested in it. Otherwise it's like not.
Absolutely.
But the idea is that you're going to grad school because you like science. There's going to be some interesting stuff. So find somebody who you can work with. And I was really lucky, and I worked with Andy Alspaugh at Duke. Mm-hmm. And he was just a really, really fantastic mentor. I don't think I would be the kind of scientist I am without him. And I feel like a lot of his lessons are the ones that I try and be like, okay, this is the kind of scientist I want to be. This is the kind of mentor I want to be. Was just a really place where you could be really creative about your science, really thoughtful. And then because we were working on pathogens, like maintain that clinical relevance. He was an MD as well. So it sort of brought that connection in, even though like I am not ever going to go on the clinical aspect. Like that's not what I can do at all.
So, so for you, as you said, the science has been not a problem to choose. For you, it was sort of the equation with your PI which mattered the most. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Mostly because I think science. So my first rotation was in a human genetics lab. My second was in like a genomics and phylogenetics, and then the third one was with Andy. So a pretty broad range. And I think that's useful. I was in a genetics program, so maybe there's more diversity in systems than like a microbiology lab. Our department has like a pretty wide range, but we're sort of generally microbiology and immunology. But I think with PIBS, people have the opportunity to really try out lots of different things as well.
Oh yeah, PIBS is one of the awesome programs.
Yeah, and so you can come in with, you're like, well, I'm curious, and we'll see how it goes, and maybe I love bacteria, and maybe I don't.
Yeah.
And just give it a try. And a lot of it's going to be how you work well with your mentor. I mean, when you were choosing a postdoc lab, I think, how did you make those decisions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If we have to go from there, like how was your transition to being a postdoc, and what made you move to Canada from there?
Yeah, so that was part of solving the two-body problem, was making that choice. But we got really lucky that the lab that my husband wanted to go to and the lab that I wanted to go to were in Toronto. Mm-hmm. So that worked out. We applied to a couple different cities like that. So it was sort of between Toronto and San Francisco and San Diego were like places that had labs that both of us would be interested in. But I was also looking for because my PhD mentor was a MD and a man, I was like, well, I want to see what it's going to be like if to be a female PI. That was sort of part of the equation, just to say, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to follow Andy's path exactly. So what other options are available? And I was really lucky that Leia's lab had a spot for me. And she is just this amazing, driven, ambitious, like thoughtful, interesting scientist. So it was really nice to switch gears a lot too. She has a very different mentoring style than Andy. So that was really nice to see. And it was also really good to see you can do mentoring in lots of different ways and have it still work. And I think that's really important too. And that's one of the really nice things about doing that movement, is that you can say like, okay, even if I don't do it exactly like my PhD mentor did it, there's other ways that you can make things be successful. And yeah, so Leia's group is also much larger. I think she's up to 25 people now.
Yeah.
And she's the chair of the department, and she's basically kicking butt doing science. But
yeah.
So it was really interesting to move also like that sort of speed of science too, and sort of figure out what is it, not just the science that I want to do, but like how do I want to do it? What's the speed? What are the kind of questions I want to answer? And what kind of mentoring do I want to be doing too?
Okay. Yeah. So like compared to your grad school, did you get a lot more independence in terms of deciding your research questions in your postdoc, or like in terms of thinking or formulating new ideas? Was that something very different, or did you have the chance to do it in both grad school and postdoc?
Yeah, I think I had the chance to do it in both, and that's sort of why I'm still here, and probably. So each lab sort of gives you the idea was that you'd have a foundation, sort of a project that you're starting on that you know is going to be good, but then like freedom to explore it after you've sort of built that foundation of knowledge. Yeah, I think that's that creative energy is what keeps you going.
Right, yeah. And after your first postdoc, you again moved to UCSF as a visiting postdoc. How did you benefit from that professionally? Was that a time for you to sort of start writing applications, or like?
Yeah, so that was a big one. One of the big things that I had done in my grad school, but hadn't really done in my postdoc with Leia, was animal work.
Okay.
And so when we work on fungal pathogens, I had been doing mostly in vitro stuff for the last few years. And so what happened is that Leia and Suzanne have a shared R01, so they're co-PIs on this proposal. And so I moved from Leia's lab to Suzanne's lab, where I could do some really good translational, like in vivo work, and that was really beneficial. And of course, UCSF is just a really thrilling scientific environment. You know, it's fun to be there. It's a little bit tricky to live there with a child.
I see. Okay.
But like the science was great. And again, it was nice to see a different mentoring style, see a different team dynamic, and figure out, you know, it definitely expanded my network. And I feel like I met people that I wouldn't have met otherwise by being at UCSF, because of the speakers and other things that were happening in that environment.
Yeah, so you definitely had a way different kind of exposure in terms of people and in terms of science. So that's really amazing, actually. Not everybody has, you know, at least 2 significant exposures during their postdoc. If they have, that's quite wholesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's good, but I also recognize that it was a lot of privilege to be able to like afford to move.
I see.
To like to have a family that's willing to move. Part of the move also was that my husband's lab had moved to San Francisco a few years earlier. So he was reunited with his lab to go back to San Francisco. But to say, like, a lot of people don't have that flexibility or want the flexibility to move across the country or the continent multiple times. And so I definitely recognize that it should not be expected that people do that movement. Even though like I can recognize that I benefited from it. So I wish that it was not so required that we uproot our whole lives multiple times.
It's tough. It's really tough. You get to adjust so many other things and not just your lab. It's
Not just your lab. So like my daughter went to 3 different schools in 3 years and now she's online. So I guess 4.
oh
So, but those are the things, like we do this for our careers, but there's also consequences for our families when we do these things. And it's hard, but hopefully we've settled.
yeah.
The goal is not to move again.
Sure, absolutely. Now, going from there, I would like to go to one of the most intense questions about the decision-making part. Like, when was it during your postdoc that you decided that, okay, this is the time that I have to start writing applications, or this is the time I have to at least start making my list, the search list? For example, even writing the K-99 grant, when do you think it's a good time to start preparing? Because we just have, till our 4 years of postdoctoral experience. So would you like to?
Yeah. I mean, so I sort of went into my postdoc. Somebody had like told me once that like postdocs are 5 years. So I said, okay. And so like that got in my head. I was like, that's what you do. So I was sort of on that timeline. So when I was in Canada, I was not eligible for a K-99. So I applied for a K-22 instead. So I want to just like advertise for people who are in NIAID funded work. Like the K-22 is probably a better option.
Okay.
But then the problem with that is that if you get a fundable score, you have a year to find a job. So, yeah. But they're flexible. They understand like the point is to transition you. So there's that. So in terms of being ready, like you just, whenever you want to, I think putting together an application, even if you only send out like 1 or 2 that year, doing the process of writing it helps you refine your thoughts, helps you refine what you want to do in the lab for the next year, to realize like, this is how I want to be independent. This is the kind of experiments I want to do. And like, the first interview you do is hard and it's okay if you don't I don't think anybody does like one and done for faculty jobs.
Of course not.
So I think it's worth like putting it out there, and then you're not going to like remember your bad application if you do it, right? So I think it's worth giving it a shot and putting those ideas together, and like having a research statement and being able to, when you put those ideas together, it helps you in your lab in addition to doing the next things in your applications.
Right. So, I mean, did you have career options that were alternative to being a research faculty? Was there ever in your list?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Did you have career options that were alternative to being a research faculty?
No, I had no backup. This is the only thing I wanted to do.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, maybe it's better to have a backup, but I didn't. But I also know a lot of people who've gone into industry and have loved it. So both at a startup level or at a bigger company level. So it's not, or gone into teaching or gone into other things that are different paths. Like they're all available, but I also can recognize in myself that I didn't want to do anything else. So I'm hoping this works.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's really, really point on to have, one thing on your list and to just go for it. So if you have to tell this one thing that, sort of kept you grounded about academia, apart from research, what would it be? Like teaching or mentoring?
I mean, I think one of the things that is really nice about our job is that we get to sit around and talk with smart people all the time, right? Like just, you get to talk to interesting people. They tell you interesting stuff. You get to learn, and you have this sense of like, you can be curious and exciting and interesting, and be surrounded by people who have that same passion. And I think that's really crucial. And that was part of like, this is what I love doing. I love doing research. I love thinking about it. I love the writing parts most of the time. I say most of the time, not all the time. But it's exciting to get into a project. And so that's, yeah.
I think the independence of choosing your questions of interest is probably, that's what keeps you going.
Right. I mean, we still have to like write proposals that are fundable. So like there's sort of some limits on that. But you do get to make choices about what you want to do. And that's really nice.
It's great. If we have to continue on that, how was the hiring climate and application writing like when you were applying? I mean, the reason why I feel like asking this question is because no matter how many answers I hear to this question, each person's journey is different. The challenges they face, the success they achieve, it, all of them are different. And hence each aspiring faculties has a different confidence level, right, when they're applying. So therefore, I would like to hear from you, how was your application journey in terms of, writing grants, securing funding, in addition to the core research that brought you here? Like, what else made you a strong candidate?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit hard to say because I don't necessarily know why, I don't know why I got picked, right? And I feel like a lot of it is luck. A lot of it is based on what was missing in a department they wanted to fill. So I can't rule out that like if you do it this way that it's going to work. But a lot of it was stressful, and a lot of it, one of the big reasons why it's stressful is that you put yourself out there and then it's totally out of your control. And that's really hard because we're used to dealing with problems that we can just do. Like if there's something hard, you just like work harder and do it. If there's like a challenging experiment, you just like troubleshoot it till it works. But for job applications, it's sort of a different process because you just put yourself out there and you hope that they like you, and it's weird. So I guess things on my application that I think were helpful were I did apply and have a good score on a K-22. So that was helpful. But even on that one, like the same critiques that you get when there's definitely like a Matthew effect in research, right? Like if you get an award, then you're more likely to get the next award, right? And so writing for things early on in your career, even getting these little scholarships and fellowships and like that sort of snowball into bigger and bigger stuff. And that's hard because what if you start slow, right? Like people aren't allowed to reach their full potential. And I don't really know how the system could change, but like you can do good science, right? You have to, if you are in a good lab, you do do interesting science, write good papers, like that's helpful. But I also recognize that some of that is also out of your control, right? Because it's like, does your PI only want cell papers? Then you got to do a lot of work. Right. And so that's a good question to ask when you're looking for places of like, do they publish on a regular basis in non-high impact journals so that you're guaranteed that you'll at least have evidence that you have done work. I know of people who are in really fancy labs and their PIs only publish in Cell. And so they got out of grad school with no papers. And so then it was really hard to get postdoc fellowships. And then it was hard to get like the next step. And like that's out of your control. I think it's a good question to ask when you're looking for
so when you're looking for either a grad school or a postdoc, you should okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for new PIs because like I don't have a track record of doing it. So I'm very thankful that Faith and Darian took a chance to join my lab.
Sure. Yeah. And like, what are some of the challenges that you faced during this? Because not everything is smooth all the time, and especially during such a hard time of searching. And then like, how did you decide on U of M and not something else?
Yeah, so U of M basically was perfect, which I was not expecting. So there's a couple, I thought that I would have to compromise on something like location, or startup package or spousal offer or like something. But U of M was perfect. So I feel really lucky. You know, my family is in the Midwest, so it was close to them. It's a benefit. The department was great. People have been super, super welcoming. I've made connections I wasn't expecting to make, and I'm starting to go in research directions I wasn't expecting to go in. Like that was really nice. My husband is also a research assistant professor in DCMB, and so he's been sort of well supported. And so that was like some of those big challenges of getting all those things. That felt really lucky. But it also felt like when I was applying that Michigan sort of cared about whether the new faculty were set up for success. So that helped. Yeah, so I mean, I also, Ann Arbor's great.
Yeah.
So.
Nice.
Can I interrupt? There are a few questions in the chat,
sure.
Manaswini.
Yeah,
if you want to monitor them. Yeah.
Sure. I am looking at the chat. Actually, I'll take one of the questions right now based on what we are continuing. So Nicole, she asking, when did you realize that you wanted to be a research faculty, and were you ever intimidated or deterred by the competitive nature of that career path?
So I realized probably halfway through grad school that I wanted to be a research faculty at a research R1 institution. And we're all here because we're competitive, like, you know. So I recognize that like it's hard, but like so is everything. So is everything else. And it's just a choice about like what hard thing are you going to do. I mean, I say this before I've gotten my first R1 reviewed, so we'll see how I feel afterwards. But yeah, there's definitely some moments when you're on the faculty job search and you're getting rejections. You're like, well, what am I going to do if this doesn't work? And I had no backup. So I'm glad it worked. Yeah. And it's, I'm also lucky that I haven't been like pushed out by anything, right? That there hasn't been anybody who's stood in my way, who's blocked my progress, where I know that that's not true for everybody. And so there's a lot of luck in this process, and it's hard to reconcile this meritocracy with the luck. But yeah, you know, we can all work hard and do things perfectly and still like not get what we want. And that's really rough. And I don't know, I feel like that's a problem of like investment in science and investment in like research in general at a national level. You know, with more money, we could have more scientists and it wouldn't have to be this competitive, but I don't know how to fix that world right now.
Yeah, competition is inevitable. For sure.
Yeah. And like there can be good competition, but there can also be like nasty stuff. I will also say that my field, the fungal pathogenesis field, is super, super welcoming. And that was one of the factors that helped keep me going, is that it felt like there was a community of people who was looking out why I didn't want to switch out of the fungal pathogenesis field, because these people are great.
Right.
So
to continue Nicole's question, did you have more of cheerleaders or more of critics along your way? And did that decide your view towards the competitive nature?
Oh yeah. I mean, all of my mentors have been not just mentors, but also sponsors, right? So there's that difference of like the mentor who can tell you, but the sponsors who will push you to and like help you get the next thing. And I've been like all the people that I've worked with have been really fantastic sponsors as well.
Yeah.
I think it sort of reemphasizes how important it is to make good choices on that. piece. But I also think that having like Leah and Suzanne be my postdoc mentors, who are both women, who are both like really succeeding in their field, then I could say that there was an expectation that like I wouldn't have to face any of the sexist issues that are out there, and I could just have these women be my sponsors, and I think that's really important.
That's beautiful. I mean, that's amazing.
They both balance like so much stuff. Like Suzanne is a clinician as well. She's got a family. Her spouse is also in science, both with children. But like these are good role models, and that really helped too, to see like these people are succeeding, and then there's a path forward for me in this career.
Right. We have two more questions from Zeriwe. We will definitely touch on that once I start moving towards the life as a faculty member here. So what are still the aspects of joining the university as a new faculty and starting your lab that were easier or harder than you had expected? This was one of the questions that was.
Yeah, I mean, so COVID was kind of hard. I wasn't expecting to shut down like right when we got started. But I think, so the university put together a launch committee and sort of helped keep track of all the things. They helped me recognize things I should be asking about that I wouldn't necessarily have known to ask about, to make sure that I'm on track. I have a really supportive chair, Beth Moore, she's fantastic. And that helps me sort of ease the sort of path forward. But also I'm like trying to be kind to myself and be like, well, COVID sucks. And so this is not the year that I wanted. But I think we've done reasonably well. And people have been just like rolling with it, be like, okay, we're working in shifts. Like we're making that work. We're having we're trying to do do science, even in really weird circumstances.
And were there resources enough for you to help you navigate your new role?
I think so. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that's out there that it's going to be helpful. Sometimes you don't know how useful something's going to be until you have done it. Yeah. So I appreciate that there's all this faculty development resources available. You know, they sort of flood you with a lot of information at orientation. And now I'm like, oh, I think I understand why I might want to have this information. So I think if you're proactive about it, there's a lot of stuff out there. And I think I went into it being like, it's okay for me to ask a lot of questions. I'm not supposed to know how to do anything yet. And so I asked a lot of people a lot of questions, and I think that was good. And you can like, don't give in to the imposter syndrome. You do deserve to be here. Like these are smart people that picked you to be part of this system and program. So just to like, yep, that's great. And also now I can ask questions because it's okay that I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I will
that's a big
go
one.
to therapist question now. So how many lab members do you have, and how do you decide hiring or searching?
So I have Faith and Darian are grad students in my lab. I have Noelle, who's a technician, and Andrea, who's a research scientist. So it's a bit bigger than I was expecting to be this year. But I got the advice that if there's the right people, you should just hire them and then worry about other stuff later. So I'm putting all that worrying off till later.
I see. There is another question. If not yet there, how are you planning towards that? I guess considering also the current situation of remote everything. Actually, yeah, that's a very important question. Like how are you managing being a new PI and mentoring people remotely, or are you also going to lab right now? How's it?
Yeah, so I was in lab today. I forgot to mention that I also have Katie, who's an undergrad in my lab. So it's actually like quite a few people. Yeah, it's hard to do remote mentoring. So I try and be there in the morning so that I can overlap with Faith and Darren because they're sort of new in the lab, but that was sort of I also have to negotiate childcare, so that worked out.
Yeah.
It's hard to do remote everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Katie, they only just allowed undergrads back in the lab right now, but we sort of developed an online only research program for her for this term. It's, yeah, I don't know. I think right now, like, we don't have room to even rotate anybody with the space restrictions.
Right.
So that's been a limitation. I don't know how that sounds really rough, and I wish it was easier for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully we'll catch up next year and we'll get more students for sure. We have another question from Helen. How did you, how did negotiating your salary or benefits or startup package work for you? And I mean, if you're able to share.
Yeah, I can say a little bit, but this is going to be like depend on each person, I'm sure. So I came up with like a list of everything I could picture wanting in my lab. It was pretty comprehensive, but like the numbers are total, like the cost of everything is like totally out of thin air because the list price of everything is not what you pay. So I just put the list price for, like, as if you go on the Fisher versus Fisher, like through end markets, that you could tell, like, anyway, put a bunch of stuff on. And said, this is my request, my equipment request, and so on and so forth. But the biggest thing that I was negotiating for was a spousal hire. So I basically used whatever negotiating power I had on that part and didn't feel like I could ask for too much more on the other aspects, because that's sort of a big one. So I know that some people can sort of compare across offers and try and like ask for more here or there, but the big thing I was asking for was a two-body solution. So, but I think all these things, like, if you want, there's a future PI Slack which I was on that had a like negotiations list, so people could put anonymously like the range of their startups and their salaries and like other benefits that they were getting. And I think that's really helpful to help calibrate what you can expect.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that's really nice. That's something.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's Future PI Slack, and it's a pretty big community there. So I think I would recommend it for people who are on that track.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things that, like, the what's the one about like salaries? If you hiding your salary only helps your employer.
Exactly.
So,
it's so true.
right. And so like having that information from Future PI Slack can be like, that's where you get that piece. So also in the sense that I talked to some of the like in general terms of the faculty, like the recent hires, to be like, were you able to do the research with the startup package you were offered? And they all said, right, that's a sort of, as they're interviewing you, you're also interviewing them. So to make sure that like that's all aligning as well.
Yeah. We have another question from Amanda. What are the top 2 to 3 things that grad students should be doing to prepare for an academic faculty career?
I mean, the answer is going to be the same for a lot of things, of like, write papers, write grants. And getting comfortable with writing is such a big deal. So when I was at grad school, I was reading, you read your blogs about like how to do, I don't know if blogs are a thing anymore now, it's all Twitter, but on like how to be a scientist. And one of them, Arjun Raj did a post on like the Shockley model of academic success. And it's sort of like, there's like a bunch of different things that have to align to like be productive. Let me just like pull this up actually, because I thought it was super helpful to me. Here, I'll actually put this into the chat. But it was like on how to do science, and let me just read them out. It was like, 1 is to think of a good problem. 2, is to work on it. 3, recognize a worthwhile result. 4, make a decision about when to stop. That's a big one, of like when to stop and start writing. Then write adequately, profit from criticism, so get feedback and take it properly. Determination to submit the paper to a journal, so like don't let your imposter syndrome get you down, like send it to a good journal. And then persistence in making changes. And I thought that was actually really helpful, that you didn't have to be good at all of those things right away, but you can like pick one thing and get better at each of those aspects. And so one of the things that I think helps me is that I write fast and get a lot of feedback. So that helps by getting the feedback, you're not just like relying on your own brain, you can rely and ask for help from other people, and they're going to see things that you don't see because they have different thoughts and ideas. And so by writing and getting that out there and getting feedback, then you're more likely to get something that's interesting that you're going to put out in the world. So I think, do your science, like do your bench work and like do experiments, but also like think about, well, what's a complete story? What can I write up and get that out there? And I think that helps. And the whole thing of like write applications, because there's a snowball effect for sure.
Yeah. The more you
but
write,
like
the more you get.
Yeah. And but also like don't lose heart. Like if you're not like already on like whatever, like there's opportunities to succeed. So don't make it like this isn't the end. Like there's always opportunities.
Thanks, Teresa.
Oh, sorry. Does somebody want to ask?
I just said thanks. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Teresa.
I have one question, which I also saw in the pre-submitted questions. As we know, being a PI is not the only role as a faculty. One also needs to get integrated into the department. There is also teaching along with mentorship responsibilities. Having said that, how are you managing your role during these turbulent times?
Yeah.
Because it would have been just 6 months of setting up your lab before we shut down. So how does your normal day look like? And because, we don't meet people, along the hallway or like, having some conversation after a meeting. So how is that working for you as a rapport with other faculty in the department and with your students in particular?
Yeah, so I mean, this is part of why I like to be in the lab in the mornings, so I can talk with my students and make sure things are going well. And hopefully they think it's helpful. But part of it is that, there's faculty that I talk to. There's a lot of emoji texting back and forth that helps. There's this department, the department I'm in is just, I am so happy to be here. And I can just picture all the many ways that it could have been worse. So I'm really grateful that I'm in this position. So my usual day is I do the morning shift in lab. When I have experiments, sometimes there's grant deadlines or the things that keep me out of lab, or if I have a lot of meetings, then sort of going back and forth doesn't work. But we're pretty lucky that we found a daycare to watch my daughter. So she's in 2nd grade, but they help navigate online school. And that one's really hard. Like if you have a kid and you're doing full-time schooling with them, like there's no time to also do a job. Because they're like on for 15 minutes, then off for 15 minutes, like the whole day. Like how are you? It takes me like 15 minutes to like get into an idea. Like before right? Like the sentence doesn't come right away. The sentence takes 15 minutes and then you can keep going. But like, so we were really lucky but also like it's money, right? We're paying. And so it's just, this whole thing is amplifying inequality in schooling, in access to opportunity. That is like one of the big tragedies here. Like we're not all equally affected by this pandemic.
For sure.
So doing that, and then I try and do, after this, I'm going to go get my daughter, and then we're going to like do stuff. And then in the evening, I'll do some writing and reading, and hopefully do it again next week.
Right. Yeah.
But I think, we're all trying our best. This is not, hopefully people will take into account that this is a really crappy year. And, but a lot of my friends are wanted to apply for faculty jobs this year. And like, that's where you could see it's like really rough. It's the number of jobs that are listed is lower.
Yeah.
A lot of places have hiring freezes like that. It's really tough.
Yeah, this year itself has been so hard because of the pandemic, and I think the effects are going to be felt way beyond next year because hiring anyway in research takes time.
Yeah,
and people do wait long. So
people who like got an offer and then had it frozen.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, oh, so close.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's super hard, and it doesn't feel fair. And I feel like if schools were smart, they could get some really smart people this year. But I don't know about how the higher up money works.
Well, I will take the last question from Zeribe. In the beginning, are you doing experiments, or do you foresee being very hands-on experiments whenever lab normally returns?
Yeah, so I'm still in the lab, and I expect to be in the lab I'm not ready to give up the bench yet. And so people in my lab have been fantastic about troubleshooting basically everything again from scratch, right? Because we're all getting all of our assays up and going. It's definitely not trivial to restart a research program like that, or like get it started in the first place. So I've been very grateful that things have recapitulated from my old lab to here. That's been it's a little nerve-wracking because you hear stories about like, well, the water changes and then everything doesn't work anymore. So luckily things are still working, but it has taken effort to troubleshoot and get things going. So yeah, I'll probably be in the lab for the next while. I'm not quite ready to step back.
Of course, yeah. To end in a lighter note, I have a question, or there were other pre-submitted questions about work-life balance. So do you have something to go to, one that sort of disconnects you from science or the lab? Something.
Yeah, I mean, like my work is also my life, but not like in a weird way, but like all of this is my life, right? So it's not that there's a clear separation, but just that you gotta do the parts that make you happy, figure out how to get out of the things that make you unhappy. Make sure to marry a supportive person. Jennifer Doudna said this too, so I'm not the only one. Choose your life partner wisely, and if they're not pulling their weight in the house, cut them off. No, hire somebody else. Like time is hard. So if you have if you have the opportunity, so this is what I'm looking forward to, is like outsourcing stuff. Restaurants are great at food. I don't have to be. Things like that. Whatever you can do to make your life easier, because there's a bunch of other stuff that's hard. So.
And they require time, a lot of time and patience with everything.
Yep.
That's nice to know. I mean, I have a very personal question, but if we have time, I would like to ask it. What do you think? I can? Okay. So if you have to pick out one or two skills from your training, be it from grad school or from postdoc, what were those which became invaluable to you for what you do on a day-to-day basis today as a faculty? And is there something that you think you should have picked up and you sort of think now?
Oh yeah. That's a good one. I think the biggest thing was, it's not like learn how to write fast. and get feedback. That's important. And I'm going to say that a lot of times. But the other one is just be willing to try it. Like there's a bunch of experiments there's like so much cool stuff out there that having the attitude of just like, well, fail quickly, give it a shot. I think that's been really helpful for me in my career. I don't have like one technique that I do all the time or like one sort of system I want to work with, but other than like, I like to do genetics, but that's, it's really broad. And so I feel like it's better to attack a scientific question from multiple orthogonal angles than to just apply your one tool to different systems, because then you can really explore it. But there's so many different ways that people do science. Like other people would not want to do it this way, and that's totally fine. So yeah, I think for skills like that are important, it's just like, yeah, learn how to write fast and get that out there, get feedback, and learn not to be defensive when people write terrible things on your proposals. I think that's a learned skill too. But yeah, all of it's learnable. So
thanks a lot for answering all our questions. I
Thank
would now turn over to Dr. Shobha, Beth, and if anybody else has any questions, please, this is the time.